Hello, BookTube. It's Wednesday, not Tuesday, but I have a tag for you that's too good to wait on. It's too good to miss, and I hope that it sparks a huge discussion. It's a tag, and it's got prompts, but it's really an invitation to a discussion of a subject. And oh my, is it a good subject? It's worth talking about. The tag comes from Robert G., reader of books, otherwise known to his friends on BookTube as Bob. It was a wonderful channel, and I'll leave a link to it down below. He involved me, tagged me in this to get involved in this conversation, all about rereading. Such a fascinating subject. I can't get enough of it. There's a great book on it that I've read and reread a couple of times. All of the prompts here are about rereading. Now, there are 7 prompts plus tagging people, and a lot of the prompts mush together. If your answer to 1 is yes, then you're already going to be elaborating on your answers to 2, 3, or 4. So I'm gonna treat it that way and deal with the individual questions, the ones that don't mush together, separately. Because most of the initial questions are about just rereading, and they avoid uh, explicitly asking the big question that underlines them all. Question number 1 is, do you ever reread fiction? Why or why not? Question number 2 is, do you ever reread nonfiction? Why or why not? Question number 3 is, if you reread fiction, what kind of fiction are you most likely to choose? Bestsellers, classical literature, genre fiction. If you reread nonfiction, what kind of nonfiction? This is prompt number 4. If you reread nonfiction, what kind of nonfiction are you most likely to choose? Histories, biographies, memoirs, philosophy, etc. Those 4 questions uh, are basically the same thing, unless your answer is that you don't ever reread. And I have not met many people in a lifetime of meeting readers. I've not met many people who never reread anything. Uh, I had this conversation with all the books people that I knew, some of whose books are in your home. Uh, Way back when this subject came up in, of all places, Seinfeld, where Jerry Seinfeld says in one episode that he has no idea why anyone would reread anything, Moby Dick or anything else. You've read it, it's done. You're going to read it again. You think it's going to come out a different way? I know that was done for laughs. Jerry Seinfeld does not read. No one involved in the Seinfeld TV series reads. No one in the world reads. Just our little island of misfit toys. Barely anybody in the world. I honestly don't think, no matter what recent surveys say, I honestly don't think that the number of passionate free time readers in the world is higher than 1 million people. I honestly don't think that. There's all sorts of lot buying and number jiggling shenanigans that go on with determining the sales of best-selling books and the sales and placement of New York Times bestsellers. There's all sorts of data massaging and outright lying going on about that subject, obviously, since Donald Trump Jr. can have a bestseller on the New York Times bestseller list. Since I don't believe that, I don't believe any of those numbers. And once I'm cut loose from those numbers and from most of the polling that underpins those numbers, I'm free to come up with numbers of my own. And based on my own experience as someone who's pretty extroverted and who has been out in the world with readers for a pretty long time, I don't think the number's more than 1 million. Total. In the whole world. In any language. And I wouldn't be surprised if some extraterrestrial being came to me and told me beyond any contradiction that the number was much lower than that. I wouldn't be surprised about that. So it doesn't really matter to me that BookTube channels can have 1 million subscribers. Most of those are bots. I don't believe those are readers. In that lifetime of meeting all of those readers, I've met almost nobody that doesn't reread, ever. So the question here, do you reread fiction? Do you reread nonfiction? Why or why not? Really, the question that's underlying all of these is, why do you reread? Why and when? Under what circumstances do you reread? What do you get out of it? What is it in your reading life? At least that's how I took this, and I spent a good long time thinking about it. Because as I've mentioned on this channel many times before, and a number of you have also commented, it's that you've been listening to me and realized, wow, this is actually the case, isn't it? I do a huge amount of rereading. Huge. I've never worked out the exact percentages, but it's a lot. For those of you who are new to my channel, I am a book critic. I get review copies of books from publishers, and I read them. I read everything I'm sent. And because I read very fast and because I read all the time, I don't have anything else that I do aside from tend to my little bean. And because I don't sleep all that much, I don't have any real reluctance to reading a book a second time. So if I get an advance copy from a publisher, I draw the line at 3 times, usually. If I get a PDF from a publisher, I will get that in advance of a review copy, a paperback review copy. And if it really interests me, if I just can't resist, I will read that PDF on a device. So it's a civilized way to read anyway. I will get that sometimes, and then I will get the ARC. I will get the review copy that's not the finished copy, and I will reread that. If I don't read the PDF, then I will read the advanced copy, and then I will reread the book when I get the finished copy. I always say pencil in hand. That's an old phrase. I don't actually use that much anymore. But that's rereading. And that's new releases. There are plenty of new releases I get that I reread when I'm firmly convinced the book is so average, it's never going to have anyone reread it. It's not going to, barely going to have anyone read it. Let's just reread it. I do all that as rereading. So rereading is not just something that's reserved for the part of my reading life that has nothing to do with new releases. It is a big part of my encounter with new releases, is rereading. I will get the thing. I will read it first for first impressions, general layout of the book, all the sorts of things that are important for me to know if I'm going to report on the book to readers. And then weeks or months later, I will read the finished copy critically. I will bear down and just microanalyze the finished copy, more or less, depending on how heavy or how worthwhile a book it is. Some books are very light; they're very thin. Most books are very thin. They don't really warrant much in the way of that kind of attention. And when it's that kind of a book, I won't reread it. I might wait for the finished copy, but I won't reread it. Even so, there are plenty of new releases that I reread right out of the starting gate. So by the time the thing gets to your bookstore, I've already read it twice. And that's new releases. And then there's the chunk of my reading that isn't new releases, which is also big. It's everything that I have as an ebook. I mean, a lot of the ebooks that I read are new releases or indie books that I've never heard of before, but a lot of it is not. I'm currently making my way through, for instance, a reread of all of both Nero Wolfe and Ross Macdonald. And at one point or another in the past, I have read almost all of those books, but I'm rereading them now. And that has nothing to do with new releases. Both those authors are out of print. But it's not just on the iPad. Obviously, as you know, if you watch this channel, I also get books at my bookstore, my used bookstore. I get them by the pile, by the mountain, by the bucket load, and I reread them. I don't just buy used books and chuck them on a shelf. I am working in amongst them. And my used bookstore has lots and lots of great pricing, so I can take any kind of risk that I want there. But a lot of what I get there is rereads. Just some edition that I like, or some book that I read years ago and I haven't had it in forever, and oh my God, isn't it nice to see it again? I'm going to give it another try. A lot of it is that. So that also, used books also counts as a huge amount of rereading. I'm lucky that my used bookstore is priced so reasonably that I can experiment. I can explore there with stuff that I don't know anything about. That's really nice. Not every used bookstore is like that. And certainly no retail bookstore is like that. Retail bookstores, the books are prohibitively expensive. It is no longer possible for you to go into a retail bookstore and just take a whim on something, unless you're making a huge amount of money. So when I think about this, I realize that rereading is a big, big part of my reading world. And naturally, it makes me curious when I saw this tag, how big a part of your reading world it is. I know lots and lots of readers, and a lot of the readers that I know, including some through BookTube, their response will be, I have so little time to read, and there's so many books out there. I really can't justify to myself doing much rereading. I've got to go to work. I have the gym after work. I have kids. I have classes. I have a need to sleep, completely unconscious blob of drooling protoplasm for 9 hours out of every 24. And also, it's not like I flip a switch when I get back from the gym or from dealing with kids or from work or from school. It's not like I flip a switch. I need to diffuse from that time. So the time that I have for recreational reading is so small. I know a lot of people like that who eagerly look forward to that time and zealously guard it. They know when it is, they look forward to it. And those people have told me over the years, over the decades, that, I'm not like you. I have so little of that time that I really can't justify much rereading, because whatever rereading I'm doing is taking time away from the new stuff I could be reading. I hear that and I understand it. That makes perfect sense. It's a little sad to me, but it makes perfect sense. But also, I've talked to people who just don't get lots of rereading. They might revisit a classic that they really love for sentimental reasons, but they can't imagine, like, for instance, reading a murder mystery in 1995 and then picking up that same murder mystery and reading it again in 2005. They can't imagine doing that. Or a work of history. Why would I reread a work on Aztec history when there'll be a new work on Aztec history coming out? Things like that. Of course, those million people are what I'm talking about. Us. I'm talking about avid recreational readers of all kinds, all times, all levels of dedication. I'm talking about that. The rest of the world doesn't know why you would read a book, much less why you would reread a book. They are mystified. As mystified as Jerry Seinfeld pretended to be in that episode. So I want to know, with these questions, where you fall. The more I thought about this tag, the more I realized how much rereading I do. It's a huge amount of what I do, and I love it. I absolutely love it. Now, when it comes to new releases, I love the rereading because I am reading the first thing without any critical apparatus. I'm reading it for impressions. What is this actually like? Does it drag in the middle section? Is it condescending? Is it simplistic, simple-minded even? Is it any of those things? Believe it or not, I might miss some of that when I'm bearing down and reading it critically, because then I'm looking at how it's actually hammered together. But I want those impressions. So the first time I am gathering those impressions. And then the second time I'm reading much more critically. But even when it comes to rereading stuff that's not new releases, stuff that I would get from the Brattle Bookshop, I still love rereading because I'd like to think, I certainly hope, that I am changing as a reader. Over years, but certainly over decades, that I am changing as a reader, that I'm bringing a lot more to a book. If that book has layers and nuances, it stands to reason, I would hope, that I'm going to encounter more of those layers and nuances than I did the first time. And that's going to come up because, of course, that is the basis for the canon. Is that right there, not anything else. Don't let anyone tell you that it's anything else. It's just that. But anyway, those are my answers to the general gist of the first 4 questions here, which is, how much rereading do you do and why? What kinds of things do you reread and when? It turns out I do a lot of that, and I want to know what you do, very much so. So we'll move on. We'll jump through all of those questions and move on to the batch of questions that aren't quite all mushed together. Question number 5. If you read a book which has been translated from another language, when you reread the same book, would you reread the same book in a new or different translation? I certainly would. It's a big part of the publishing world. Not a big part, but a steady, consistent part, is that older canonical works and even more recent but quasi-canonical works are constantly being retranslated. Even in the timid American book market, this is true. There isn't a season. There isn't a book season that goes by when there aren't several high-profile translations of works, new translations of works. And for me, those break down into 2 categories. One is new translations of works where I have not and cannot read the original. That happens. That happens all the time. And I find that fascinating because I like English language translations on their own, as their own entities. I read them on their own and love them on their own. Even if I don't like them as a translation, I still love thinking about what choices the author is making, the translator is making. I love doing that sort of thing, and 2025 has a ton of works in translation coming out, major things and minor things, tons of them. The Man in the Iron Mask in a new translation. The Odyssey in a couple of new translations. I think there's an Iliad later in the year. And all sorts of other things as well. All sorts of things. In both categories, for me. Either a new translation of a work that I've never read in the original, or, for instance, a new translation of a work where I've not only read it in the original, but I love it and know it in the original. the translations all feel a little odd to me. I can't help but look at them as artificial constructions. All of that is going to happen in any new book year. So the answer to this question is a resounding yes. Yes, I read new translations of stuff all the time, and also pine for more. I pine for more translations of stuff than I get in any year. Then question number 6 is, how many times would you reread the same book? I would feel a little bit of cheek blushing shame here if I weren't in the company that I'm in. But I am in that company. I know you all perfectly well. We are all absolutely addicted readers. Hopelessly addicted readers. There's BookTube, and then there's this little corner of BookTube. And I'm not saying that this little corner of BookTube has more free time to read. Plenty of you are really, really busy. But I know when somebody's been bitten by the bug well and properly, and when they haven't been. And you all have been. So I don't feel any blush of shame in saying that there are some books that I have reread literally more times than I can count. There's a handful of books that I have reread literally more times than I can count, where I have lost count, where I don't actually know what it is I'm doing when I'm reading them. I do still go back to them, but I don't know that it even counts as reading anymore. It might be the closest that I ever come to prayer. I don't know. Yes, there are books that I have read many, many times. I'd be willing to bet a lot of you feel the same way and have certain books. When I read this originally, I was trying to think of a mental list of things that I have read many, many times, countless times, reread countless times. Of course, the first batch of books that came to my mind was when I was traveling. This footlocker right here. Once upon a time, the bottom of that footlocker was books. I made them into a tessellated little layer that when I tamped on it just right, those books were lodged in place at the bottom of that footlocker, and you could turn it upside down. You could roll it down a hill, as happened a couple of times, and it wouldn't dislodge the books. And those are all the same books. I didn't vary that roster at all. So I traveled all over the place, all over this big blue world, rereading books. I never went to bookstores. Never. What would be the point? Not only did I usually not want to go into cities and shop around, and not only were my dogs not welcome, much less the strays from the town, but also, what am I going to do? I'm going to buy a book and then have something extra to carry around? No, I brought one company of old friends with me and reread them all the time, depending on what kind of a mood I was in. But that's it. That was all. So I have reread those books, that company of books, over and over and over again. And they're all pretty much all canonical. They're all names that you would recognize, things that you would know. But even outside of traveling, yeah, there are plenty of books that I've read. When I was traveling, and I knew that I might have very long waits, very long stretches, especially on the open ocean where there's nothing at all. When it was that kind of rereading, I brought inexhaustible works. I brought some of my oldest friends, some of the classics that were my oldest friends. But when I'm not traveling, I still do a lot of rereading, and there's still titles where I have read the book more times than I can count. I didn't travel with them, usually, some of them, but I even so, The Jungle Books by Rudyard Kipling, The Black Arrow and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson, Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson, all of the canon of Sherlock Holmes, the Tarzan books, especially the John Carter of Mars books, Dracula. I have read these things more times than I can count, just endlessly. Boswell's Life of Johnson, the Diary of Samuel Pepys. Where I can just go back to these things over and over and over and over again, endlessly. And I do. Usually I tell myself, this prompt says, reread the same book. How many times do you reread the same book? I'm talking about rereading the whole of the thing, not just parts of it. And the number of times, typically speaking, like I mentioned earlier in the tag, the number of times is 2, at most. So I'll get an advanced copy of a book. I will read it. If it's got any kind of meat on its bones, I will reread it when I get the finished copy. Usually, that's enough for the book. Usually, I'm done with the book after that, unless 20 years pass and it's stuck in my craw and I've thought a lot about it and I find it used, then I might revisit it. But otherwise, no. Most books that come out are not worth one read, much less two. I give them two, and then that's it. Most of the time, I don't worry about rereading something over and over and over again. But there's a small category of books that I have read more times than I know. Just there, and I wonder if that's true with you. If you have go-to books like that. I suppose I've been mentioning only Victorian stuff and earlier, but I suppose I could mention The Lord of the Rings, certainly. And also also The Price of the Phoenix by Sandra Marshak and Myrna Culbreath, which is a Star Trek novel. I am not meaning to put it in the same level of literature as the others. But, let's see here. Prompt number 7 is, what's the most recent book that you've reread? I've got 2 candidates for that. One I am slowly rereading. I am rereading Mr. Scarborough's Family and reading it out loud to all of you with copious editorial interruptions. We're having a blast. Just having a blast. Just enjoying how good a storyteller Trollope is. We're just having a blast. In fact, I'm really surprised and touched by how many of you are not reading ahead. You are literally letting me read the book to you. You're stopping, even though by this point in the book, we're almost halfway. By this point in the book, you definitely want to read ahead. You are definitely invested. A number of you are letting me run the show, which is wonderful. That's one example. But then there's also this, which I reread last night, Kennedy for the Defense. Just got this at the Brattle yesterday. I've read this a couple of times, so this was reread more than once, more than twice. I dipped my toe in a whole bunch of books last night, and this one out, it's so talky. It's so wonderfully talky that I lapped it up from beginning to end. So those would be the most recent. I think the next one will be the Red Box, Nero Wolfe adventure by Rex Stout, that I read, and if I remember correctly, I really enjoyed it. The one standout thing that I remember about it, I'll reread it this afternoon or tonight, but the one standout thing that I remember about it is that it starts with the unthinkable. It starts with a client convincing Nero Wolfe to leave his brownstone. Nero Wolfe is not the kind of adventurer who goes like Sherlock Holmes and falls flat on the rug with a magnifying glass or goes out tromping in the marshes. Nero Wolfe never leaves his home. Almost never leaves his home. People come to him and that's it. Clients are constantly coming to him and saying, well, I'm a busy businessman or an entrepreneur, so I can work you in to talk about this missing woman or this missing cash. Just show up at my office at around 3, and Nero Wolfe just shuts it down immediately. Now, I'm not going to do that. You come here or we're not doing any business. And at the beginning of the Red Box, he is convinced to leave the brownstone. I'm almost certain that I'm remembering that correctly, but the specific details of the book itself, they'll come to me as I'm reading, probably 3 or 4 chapters ahead of when they occur. But I doubt that I could call many of them to your attention now. I doubt I could remember many of them now. That will technically be a reread, but it will feel like a read. And that'll be next. What else? I got a Byron book yesterday that I really want to reread. That'll probably be on the roster for tonight as well. Lots of rereading. It wasn't until this tag that I really took stock of just how much rereading is in my reading life, which made me want to hear about yours. And then the next prompt after what's the most recent book you've reread is to tag people. And Bob tagged a whole bunch of great people. If you do any rereading, and he somehow missed tagging you, definitely do this. Like for instance, well, who did he tag? Is there anybody I'm going to know off the top of my head that maybe has not done this? That maybe he has not tagged? See, I'm seeing some names that aren't on here, but I'm wondering how many of them would be applicable. Like, for instance, Robin Song Reads is not on the great list that Bob does, but Denson also is happy to admit that he's a new reader. Probably hasn't done a whole lot of rereading. Well, I guess David Murphy's not on here. I could tag him. He does a ton of rereading. And also Christopher Russell. As long as I'm tagging one troublemaker, I might as well tag another. And is Joe Spivey on this list? Joe Spivey is currently making inroads into canonical literature, but I get the impression that a lot of those inroads are first times, which doesn't really speak well to the educational process in the north of England. No, he's not on here. All right, well, I guess I'm tagging the same 3 incels that I tagged last time. We'll see what they make of it. Where would I be without insults? But anyway, I couldn't wait until next Tuesday. This is just too interesting. Tell me all about rereading. I want to know all about rereading. Well, tell Bob all about rereading. Do his tag and go to his. I'll leave a link to his video. Go and leave an introduction, leave a discussion on him. But keep me involved as well. I want to know, how much rereading do you do? Is it a comfort thing to you? Do you do rereads not because you're wondering whether or not a book really is as good as you remember it, but because you want to be comforted? I knew a reader once who read A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens for exactly that reason. When the world is too much, he retreated into Dickens. Is that how you look at rereading? Or, like, for instance, if you predominantly read nonfiction, do you go at it because you're pretty sure that the first time you read The Arms of Krupp, you missed a lot? And that's to say nothing of the classics. Bob likes to read canonical classics. The classics, in my definition of the word, with a capital C, the writings of ancient Greece and Rome. And those are largely inexhaustible. It makes you pine, it breaks your heart for all of that body of literature that we don't have. The total body of literature that we have from the classical world is 1% of the total body of literature that the classical world had. But I'm sure that he would attest to this. How are you doing? You don't read at all. No, you don't. I'm sure that he would attest to the fact that the classics of ancient Greece and Rome are inexhaustible. You can just go back to them endlessly. Certainly I have. But I would say the same thing about the Elizabethan era as well. And let's not even talk about Shakespeare. So tell me all. Tell me all about rereading. But I'm going to wrap this up. I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.